I love to paint in sketchbooks, but I also love to buy them, and I'm much better at starting a new sketchbook than I am at finishing one. So this month I finished my first ever sketchbook. It's full of gouache landscapes, and I thought we'd take a look through and see what I painted in here. So this is the Etcher Everyday Sketchbook. Now I've had this quite a while. I originally started painting in it in July 2020, and it was my first experience with a cotton paper, and I didn't really know what to think of it. I painted this first scene right here in the front, and it was a lot different than what I was used to when I started painting with gouache. I was initially using the Canson XL, which is a cellulose paper, and you have to paint a little bit differently on a cellulose paper where the paint doesn't sink into the surface like it will on cotton. So this was a bit of a learning experience for me, but it was a nice way to start off a new sketchbook. Then I set the book aside and I didn't really use it again for a long time. I have some little kind of experiments with colour that I did. This was to explore some greens. I use a lot of greens and I like to try out different combinations. But this was a good, at least a year and a half after the first one. These are my forest slices. This is a page of experiments of different green combinations. It's a nice, easy way to try out combinations of colours to kind of see what mood they give. And it means when I want to use a specific colour combination in a painting, I can get a feel for it really quickly and without painting a whole scene. Kind of these lighter sort of turquoisey blue greens are great for like a more magical feel, or something like this would be perfect for a kind of a foggy forest feel. But it's a really easy way to explore the colours that you have. And I kind of like that. I love to try out things in a kind of a small way before I spend time on a whole painting. I don't want to kind of experiment on a larger piece, and I've done the same thing here. This was for the underwater theme that we did in GOUACHEY, and this was to explore the different ways that we could show light and different colour combinations of scenes underwater. Again, we've got these like small little snippets that are quick and easy to paint. We can explore a single idea, and it's just a really kind of low bar to trying out something new. Then we have these kind of little scenes that I started to paint. Initially, when I first began, I was taping off the edge of the page, and I really wanted these to kind of fall off the edge of the paper. So the only thing that I do is occasionally I will tape across the bottom, and that's just so that the page lays flat. So a lot of them have got this little white strip on the bottom. This was a really nice, simple scene of a view across the lake that I painted last summer. Where we were staying was next to a reservoir, and there was lots of kind of holes in the trees around that you could peep out across the water. This is a nice landscape with minimal colours. This has got black and white, and then just a little yellow and blue. Really simple, just building up the different textures in the greenery. There's nothing complicated, just a smooth gradient for the sky. Everything is layered up in such a way as to make it look far more complicated than it actually is. This is one of my favourite forest scenes that I've painted, and a couple of things that I love about this is the contrast that we have in this scene. So we've got these really nice darks in the foreground, and then these lovely pops of light where we've got a little bit of illuminated path, and then we've got these nice bright greens down here in the foreground. The scene is full of depth. We've got the paler trees in the distance, we've got the the winding path, all of these different layers of greenery, and it really was a joy to paint. And if you want a go at painting this one, I have a tutorial for this here on my channel. So the next thing I've got in here is a few pages of different techniques for working with gouache. And I did this as part of the Gouache Bootcamp, which is a short course that covers all of the basics of working with gouache, some of the things that make it different from other mediums that you might be used to. It covers all kinds of things and a little bit on cotton paper, and then some of the techniques where the type of paper changes the effect that you might get. There's a little of both in there too. If you're new to gouache, or if you want to kind of brush up on some of these basics, this mini course is free, and I will leave a link for it in the description below, and you can try out all of these different aspects of working with gouache. Some of them are just quick exercises that you can do just to familiarize yourself with how the paint is going to respond, and a few things that you might want to be aware of when working on either cotton or a cellulose paper. So these next ones are part of a sunset theme that I did. I love the colours in these. It was a nice opportunity to step away from the greens and blues that I am most comfortable with. I don't paint a lot of kind of tropical looking scenes, and this one was really lovely to paint. I love the colours in the background, and I love the little textures of the palm fronds. This was another little scene, and I don't know if you've noticed, but by now we're upside down in my sketchbook. I get asked quite a lot why half of my paintings are upside down. And it's because when I'm painting, I mostly like to have my paper set up here and my palette here. And if I want everything to kind of be the same direction, my paper is where my palette should be, and I don't like that. So I kind of just turn it round, and then my sketch is upside down in my book, but I can have my palette where it's most convenient. So this beautiful scene, you can see this lovely kind of burn through effect that we've got of the sun here. This is a really nice study in how to create bright light effects. What I love most about this is how this section almost looks brighter than the white of the page. And that's because of all of these different ways that this light is showing up on the tree and the path and the mountains in the distance. When we want to show light on something, just painting something bright is not enough. The best lighting effects come from when we show the effect of that light on everything around it. So that was a really fun one to paint. And now we're back into the woods. There's plenty of forest scenes in here. They're one of my favourite things to paint. And this scene I've actually painted a couple of times. I originally painted it in like a quick colour study. It was a much smaller version. Then I painted a more fantasy version with kind of brighter colours. And this is what I was talking about with the forest slices. We can kind of use the same scene, and just by using different colours we can give it a slightly different flavour. But this is the one that's probably closest to the reference photo. This is a photo from Unsplash, and if you want to give it a go, I have a tutorial for painting this one as well here on my channel. What I love most about this is how the light passes through the scene. We've got this really nice gradient in the background. We've got these nice lighter areas and these tree details that are barely visible in the background. But then it kind of moves to the shadows. And again, we've got this lovely contrast of this lightest area in the background has got this really kind of bold tree silhouette over the top. And I love kind of scenes where I can explore the lighting in different ways and where I can use just kind of rough little marks to add the texture for foliage. So this scene is one of my favorites that I painted in this book, and we did this as a live class for GOUACHEY. If you wanted to paint this, you can still access that live class replay inside the community page. But one thing that was so interesting about this one is that I originally painted it, I chose the reference photo at random and thought, well, I'll give this a go. A lot of the paintings that I do, I kind of don't approach with a plan, and I have very much a figure it out as you go kind of method. And the amazing thing about this one is how deceptively simple it is once you've broken it down. I encourage anybody that thinks that they can't paint something like this to try painting this scene, because it's got all of these lovely lighting effects that look really complicated. You know, we've got this softness in the background, and that kind of soft blending is notoriously difficult to do with gouache because it's so fast drying. And then we've got all of these kind of plants and trees disappearing into the shadows. We've got this little bit of light illuminating some bushes in the distance, and this light hitting the path down here at the bottom. And it's amazing because all of the paintings that were done following the live class, they all look amazing. This is a really excellent scene for exploring ways that gouache can simplify scenes. We can work from darks to lights. We don't have to worry about kind of the order that we're doing anything in. I would definitely recommend, if you ever wanted to try your hand at gouache, this is an excellent one to give it a go. And I think you'd be amazed at the results that you got. So this scene is another version of the view across the lake that I showed you earlier. The lake was beautiful all last summer, and we got all of these lovely snippets of the seasons. Sometimes it inspired sort of bare trees, but in the late summer we were having these beautiful sunsets, and this one is a perfect way to capture that. We've got all of these beautiful colours in the sky, we've got the softness of the atmosphere in the distance, and then we've got this nice reflection of those colours. I generally don't draw kind of animals or people or anything in my scene, but I did branch out here and added a few of the geese that were in the water. This painting was mostly a study of the rocks and the water down here at the bottom. I took a photo of an area similar to this last summer, and I really wanted to kind of have a go at painting the textures in the rock. I don't know what kind of rock it is. Maybe it's slate. We have a lot of slate around here, but it's a really tough rock, but it's got all of these kind of layers in it, and we get some kind of areas that are worn smooth by the water, but we've also got these kind of sharper edges. So I wanted to explore creating that detail without it all looking too samey or too random. I've got lots of lovely greenery around the scene just because this was kind of like dark woods above the river. But down here at the bottom is my favourite thing about this painting, and it's the shadow on the water. Where the sun was shining on the water, it was illuminating all of the air bubbles, and it was kind of this yellowish kind of brown colour. But then we've got this area next to the rock that was shadowed, and obviously I darkened the yellow here next to the rocks to show the shadow, but the thing that had the most impact was when I added the foam details on the surface. This is done with a paler bluish grey rather than the white that I've used here, and that's how we get that nice lighting effect. We've still got the same details of the foam on the water, but we know it's in shadow because the colour is different, and I really love that about this scene. So this is one of the recent live classes that I've done. this lovely kind of moody atmospheric scene full of these soft colours with a little bit of pop for some brighter autumn foliage. And this type of scene is one of the reasons why I've kind of become a convert to cotton paper. Now, I will use cellulose paper for testing stuff out, but if I want to do anything with any kind of softness, or if I want to let the paint stay wet for longer to get these kind of soft blended details, then cotton is definitely the way to go. We can get this lovely kind of atmospheric effect that we just can't get with cellulose paper. The paint tends to sit on the surface, and every time you touch it, it moves around and it kind of gets a little bit frustrating. Cotton paper, I've found the paint will kind of stick more where you put it, and it makes it a joy to paint things like this. One of the things that I love about this is that the details at the edges, they kind of disappear off to nothing. We've got these kind of rough little brush marks that add the impression of maybe some leaves along this track here, but here at the bottom they're just kind of random squiggles that disappear into darkness. And I think sometimes it's a nice way to avoid overworking is to kind of focus the detail on the area where you want to draw the eye and just kind of let everything else fade away. This beautiful scene is also a tutorial here on the channel if you want to give it a go. This is a view that was taken by a friend of mine, Emma, and she very kindly said that I could paint it and share it as a tutorial with you guys. So check that out if you want to give this a go. It's a beautiful scene, and we've got all of this kind of depth through the middle here. We've got the lighting effects of the tree, kind of the burnout of the sun, but also this nicely illuminated foliage in the background here. And I love kind of, this is like a beautiful snapshot of English countryside, and I love all the different textures here. Next we have this kind of big wide panoramic scene, and this was painted as part of the night theme that we did in Gouache. We did all kinds of different night scenes, but you can't really tackle the night without a nod to the aurora. And this is one of them things that's kind of a pain in the butt to paint with gouache. Now, if you painted this with oils, you've got that lovely kind of softness that you can achieve where your paint doesn't dry, and you can move it around and fluff it up until it looks like fine wisps in the sky. This is working with the gouache very wet to get those soft blending effects, but also using kind of a soft fluffy brush to soften these areas out even further. That's what's going to give you those nice little kind of wispy effects where the illuminated atmosphere just kind of disappears into nothing. So we moved house this summer, and after being used to the very flat plains of Texas for such a long time, we moved into the mountains in North Wales, and this is the view from the top of our garden, and I'm just in love with these mountains. So we painted this as part of a live class, and there's a couple of interesting things in this one. One, this kind of softness between layers that you get when you're showing kind of atmosphere over distance is one of the most nuisance things that I've ever painted. I painted a scene similar to this a long time ago, and I chose the reference photo. It was part of a challenge, and I thought, oh, we can do the layers of simple mountains, it'll be fine. As it turns out, when you don't have little details around it to distract, your mountains and your layers and how they disappear into kind of these paler areas between the layers, they've got to be spot on. And I often like to add
more details to kind of take a little bit of the focus away. It's kind of like skies. The more bare sky you have, the more on point it's got to be. If we can overlay some silhouettes of some trees, or we can have a tree closer up that's kind of leaning in, it takes the focus off the sky, and we don't have to work as hard to create something that is kind of convincing. But this one was a really nice one to paint. Like I say, we've got the layers of the mountains, but also we've got this kind of brighter area over on the left that is shining in. And we can see here we've got kind of a yellowish grey that I've painted these details. And it's a really nice way to show that lighting effect on simple tree silhouettes. Another alive class that we did that is inspired by the good old English countryside. I really like the kind of peephole effect of this scene, and I'd love to explore this some more. We've got this kind of window opening in the foliage that we're peeping at the distance through. We've got these kind of soft greyed greens in the distance. Not a lot of detail back here, but then we've got loads of detail in the foreground kind of making up for that. We've got the little bit of wood effect on the post. We've got the tiny details of the barbed wire. We've got the little bits of ivy. And then all of this texture that makes up the foreground. And texture like this is definitely one of my favourite things to do, where you can just sit and kind of build it up in layers until you're happy, playing with light and shadows and kind of the different marks that you make to achieve these planty looking things. Also, this one was a really nice colour combination. I always love to have a little pop of purple in with my greens. So that one was very enjoyable to paint. So I love to paint realistic landscapes and a little bit of fantasy landscapes. But sometimes I kind of just want to paint something without having to think about it too much, and that's kind of where this style was born. I picked out a bunch of colours that I thought were pretty, and I covered the entire page with these kind of stripes and areas of colour that might indicate layers in a landscape. And then I went back with some smaller brushes and just began to add details. Whatever kind of details I wanted to add. So we've got some marks made with the brush just stamped onto the page. We've got some texture. This is done with a filbert brush. We've got just some dots and some lines. These are made by varying the pressure on the page as I move the brush across. And it was a really enjoyable way to just add colour to the page. Down here at the bottom, we've got almost a hint of kind of foreground foliage. Everything that I do kind of comes from a landscape painting perspective, because that's mostly what I do. So even when I'm kind of doing something a little bit abstract, it's still coming from the point of view of what my kind of knowledge and experience is grounded in. I've got these that kind of look like foreground foliage, and then some stars and a moon, because why not? This was just about kind of enjoying the process. It's not always about kind of improving. Sometimes we just need to enjoy the activity of painting. And this style is great for that. I explored this quite a lot because I did a range of tutorials for Get Gouache. But instead of kind of doing them random, I based them on some photographs of the local area and explored ways that we can kind of take our inspiration from real life, but then turn it into something that is just an enjoyable exercise in painting and exploring colour. And these were very inspired by the fall colours that are around us here at the minute.
kind of like the forest slices that I showed you at the start. This is a similar way to explore colours in abstract landscapes. You can see I've started off with colours that you might expect to see, blues and greens, some stormy skies. And over here I've explored what happens when we disregard the colours that you might expect to see in landscapes and instead just kind of use your intuition to pick a colour scheme, to pick nice colour combinations, or even explore a mood. So this was a really fun one to do, and these are just another couple of paintings that I did. I just love the way that the simple marks kind of bring these scenes to life, and they really are a joy to paint, and it lets me have a break from kind of all of the details and the paying attention to kind of realistic scenes. And every now and then we need a little bit of a mental break. And finally, this is the scene that we painted for the Halloween live stream. We painted this spooky little village. This was a really nice exploration of that fog, that beautiful effect where we've got fog sitting on the land, and how we go about painting that. We've got all of these nice little details of the treetops and the chimneys, and all of these layers kind of disappear down into nothing, and it's that kind of soft nothing between the layers that gives that impression of the fog there. So I had one final page left in this, and I was going to leave it blank. It's this one here. Sometimes we can get a little bit of transfer if there's darker colours, so I was going to leave it flat, but I decided not to. I wanted to fill this sketchbook up completely, and it was the last live class that we did, which was this beautiful autumn scene, and it turned out to be one of my favourites in the whole book. We've got this lovely light effect illuminating all of the dry grasses and the trees and things, and this one was a really beautiful one to paint. And I'm so glad that I included this in this sketchbook. This is really the last page though, and it's completely full now. Like a couple of the other like sunset paintings in this book, one of the things that I love when painting these kind of bright light effects is that, you know, we can't get any brighter than the bare white paper. And how we get this really pretty glowing effect is by showing the lights effect on everything else in the scene. So we've got these kind of bright washed out mountains back here. We've got this solid tree that the light is burning through, and we've got all of this brightness catching the edge of the trees. And it's one of the really magic ways that we can create illumination when we can't really use any kind of artificial brightness. This was a really lovely painting to paint it in a live class, and it was so nice to see it kind of come together. Sometimes I think when people watch me paint, I kind of look like I don't know what I'm doing for a long time, and often I am thankful, like this one, that it all comes together in the end and we can create something that looks quite special. But like I say, that one is genuinely the last page in this sketchbook, and now it's completely full. I'm really proud of this little sketchbook, not least because I have finally finished one, but because nearly all of these scenes in the book are part of the Get Gouache tutorials. The only one in this book that I don't have a tutorial for is this one right here. But everything else that I've showed you is part of a tutorial that is either in Get Gouache or on my YouTube channel. So thank you for joining me on my little sketchbook tour. I hope in the future to have more to share with you, but given how long it's taken, it might be a little while before I have another full sketchbook.
In the meantime, if you want to get into painting with gouache, do check out the Gouache Bootcamp. I'll put a link in the description below. There's also a free tutorial that you can try out with your new gouache skills, and I hope nothing more than for you to become as addicted to painting with gouache as I am. So until next time, happy painting!